What if everything you thought you knew about Ukraine's independence wasn't quite the full story? Today, we unravel the history, the facts, and the myths surrounding Ukraine's separation from the Soviet Union. Was Ukraine bound by conditions of neutrality? Did Russia have a legitimate claim that Ukraine betrayed agreements? And most importantly, why does this historical moment still shape the deadly conflict today? Buckle up, because we're diving deep into the truth behind Ukraine's independence. Before we discuss Ukraine's independence, let's go back in time. Was Ukraine ever a country before the Soviet Union? The answer is yes, but its history is complex. For centuries, Ukrainian lands were contested by powerful neighbours: the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, the Russian Empire, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Despite this, Ukraine had its own language, culture, and a deep sense of national identity. In 1917, after the Russian Empire collapsed, Ukraine declared independence as the Ukrainian People's Republic. But this new state was short-lived. Civil war, foreign intervention, and the rise of the Bolsheviks led to Ukraine being forcibly incorporated into the Soviet Union by 1922. From that point on, Ukraine existed as a Soviet republic under Moscow's control, but the desire for true independence never faded. Our story begins in the final years of the Soviet Union. For decades, Ukraine was a crucial part of the USSR, both strategically and economically. But in 1991, after a failed coup attempt in Moscow, the Ukrainian parliament made a bold decision to declare independence on August 24th. This wasn't just politics, it was the will of the people. 3 months later, Ukrainians overwhelmingly confirmed this in a historic referendum. 92.3% voted yes for independence. Even in Russian-speaking regions like Crimea and Donbass, the majority supported breaking away from Soviet control. And yet, despite this clear public mandate, Russia would later claim that Ukraine's independence came with conditions. But is that true? Let's find out. One of Russia's main arguments is that Ukraine's independence was granted under the promise of remaining neutral, never joining NATO or other Western alliances. But here's the truth. Ukraine's 1991 Declaration of Independence does not mention neutrality at all. It asserts sovereignty, territorial integrity, and self-determination. Nothing about restrictions on foreign policy decisions. However, neutrality was mentioned in an earlier document, the 1990 Declaration of State Sovereignty. That document stated that Ukraine would remain neutral, but here's the catch. It was not a legally binding commitment. More importantly, Ukraine's actual independence declaration in 1991 did not include that clause, making it clear that Ukraine was free to choose its alliances. Then, in 1996, Ukraine adopted a new constitution. Guess what? It didn't enshrine neutrality either. This means Ukraine had every legal right to later shift its foreign policy. The idea that Ukraine broke a neutrality agreement simply isn't backed by facts. But where does the idea of neutrality come from? Well, some of the confusion stems from the Budapest Memorandum of 1994. Here's what actually happened. Ukraine inherited one of the world's largest nuclear arsenals after the Soviet collapse. The Western Russia wanted those weapons gone. So, in exchange for giving up its nukes, Ukraine received security assurances from Russia, the US, and the UK. However, let's be very clear. The Budapest Memorandum did not require Ukraine to remain neutral. It simply guaranteed that Ukraine's sovereignty and borders would be respected. Fast forward to 2014, when Russia seized Crimea in direct defiance of this agreement, undermining Ukraine's sovereignty and violating international law. Russia later justified its actions by saying Ukraine's increasing ties with the West violated an informal expectation of neutrality. But legally, no such obligation ever existed. Another claim Russia makes is that Ukraine's independence came with an obligation to protect the Russian language and culture. This is another myth. The 1991 Declaration of Independence doesn't mention language rights. However, the Ukrainian government did allow Russian as a regional language for years. Later, Ukraine passed laws to strengthen the use of Ukrainian as the official state language. Russia claims this is discrimination, but in reality, no legal document required Ukraine to maintain Russian as an official language. Instead, Ukraine was simply reversing decades of forced Russification from the Soviet era. So why does Russia keep pushing these false claims? The answer is simple: geopolitics. These myths serve two major purposes. First, they create a pretext for Russian military action. By claiming Ukraine betrayed agreements, Russia tries to frame itself as the victim rather than the aggressor. Second, these narratives reinforce Russia's long-term goal, keeping Ukraine from fully integrating with the West. If Ukraine were truly bound to neutrality and Russian cultural dominance, it would remain under Moscow's influence indefinitely. So what's the truth? Here's the final breakdown. Ukraine's 1991 Declaration of Independence had no conditions of neutrality, NATO restrictions, or cultural obligations. The Budapest Memorandum provided security assurances, but did not limit Ukraine's right to choose alliances. Russia's claims are not based on legal documents, but political narratives to justify its actions. History matters, and understanding the facts helps us see through the misinformation that fuels conflict. If you found this video insightful, hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into global events.